Welcome to What's Left, a weekly political discussion challenging the mainstream left. I'm Eduardo Abarca with co-host, teacher and socialist Andy Lipson and community organizing socialist Kenny Cepeda. We are online at what-s-left.webnode.com. Please subscribe, rate, review, turn on your notifications, and share your favorite episode wherever you found this episode. Thank you. What are we doing today, Andy?
Well, I sprung upon you both. We had another episode in mind, and we've all just come back from a demonstration in Sacramento, and I was like, wait, what are we doing? Like, let's talk about this demonstration and some of the thoughts that came up. There was a lot of feelings that came up for me, and we met a lot of people. We met some people who know what's left. We met some people who are around the workers. Anyway, that's what I was hoping we could talk about, because I also saw you two for the first time in person for a while, and the three of us haven't been together in forever. Mm-hmm. So, like, in physical space. So I want to talk about that.
All right. So maybe we can start off with,
let's talk about what the demonstration was about, right? Like,
yeah.
So we went to a demonstration to basically oppose the vaccine mandates that are coming in California right now. In San Francisco, in particular, there's a mandate for workers that operate in indoors, like restaurants, bars, gyms, and they have to show proof of vaccination by October 13th. I know there is also a mandate for state workers, correct?
Yeah.
I'm not sure what the date of that one is, what the deadline is to prove vaccination, or you can no longer work for the state. And so, yes, this was, who organized the march? Do you know?
I know one group was V for Vaccines. Yes. There was also these bills, right? So what the two of the bills was AB 455, which I can't remember what, I think that bill was like basically saying all California businesses would be urged to do, would be doing like San Francisco, right? Like you would have to do like vaccine passports almost. And then another one that was AB 1102, which I don't know too much about. But those were some of the bills that were up or related to the imposition of vaccine mandates. And this was a demonstration opposed to that. Strong opposition to AB 1102 and all medical mandates.
It's just going, I'm looking at the Los Angeles Times here, and they said this was a late push by the Assemblyman Evan Lowe, Democrat from San Jose, to create a new workplace vaccine requirement, which failed to come together before a legislative deadline Tuesday evening, yesterday. So another proposal by Assemblywoman Buffy Wicks from Oakland, where you now live, Andy, and which fell apart last week, would have created sweeping new vaccine mandates in the workplace and to enter businesses. And the language of both proposals were never officially placed into bills, though drafts were leaked as Democratic lawmakers attempted to bring business and labor groups on board. So this is why we had come together, and this is also why, we were just, many would say even to celebrate why these had failed, right? But also just to continue the holding the line.
But they hadn't. I mean, that was the other thing, is they were being suspended. Like, everyone really does believe they're going to come back in January. So I think people were not feeling, and I think they're right to say this, is not feeling that confident, like that those bills have been suspended for now and they could return in January. So again, it was this demonstration was to highlight and bring together opposition to these.
And also, there is an element of the march that was referencing the recall that's coming up on September 14th for the governor of California, former mayor of San Francisco, Gavin Newsom, who has big political aspirations, and by and large, the recall has been framed as a Republican attack on a Democratic governor. There has been a lot of media craze, on YouTube. I get a lot of ads saying that this is an anti-vaxxer thing. Like, they're framing that fight as just a fight of anti-vaxxers. That umbrella term. versus a Democratic candidate, neglecting the fact that a lot of people are unhappy with, a lot of the dictations that have come from, Newsom. So that was an element of the march as well. There were people registering people to vote, or stickers around that. I mean, which again, I bring that up because I think it might be related to why these bills are being paused, right? Because there is a recall. I don't know, how much they will fix that, vote. Obviously, we've talked about how other votes, presidential, primary, have been manipulated. And so, again, that's a question I have, right? Like, how much of those bills being put on hold and not pushed through are due to, just waiting for their governor, who has been very effective at advancing a lot of, the things that, like the shutdowns, creating the, what is it, like the test center, a massive test center down in SoCal, funding, and also, just to throw it out there for context, a lot of people are supposed to receive $600 from the state, as another stimulus thing. Is kind of suspicious. My family is very cynical about that. It's like, of course, it's coming right now, right before the recall.
Yeah, and I had really thought, and I was talking with Brandy about this. Brandy also went to the demonstration with me. Is that the recall would be the dominant issue? I'm not sure it was. I mean, it was definitely that was there, but the dominant issue was the medical mandates and things like that. The recall was the backdrop. I had sort of seen this as sort of like the inverse of the Democratic Party does this all the time, where they put up demonstrations, but really what's behind them is getting out the vote for particular political candidates. I do think there was an attempt to do that. I just don't know if that, and I imagine, I will, if I vote, I would vote to recall Newsom. That's for sure. I won't vote for anybody to put him in anyone in place, but this would be one thing I would vote for. It's on the 16th or something like that. But 14th. I don't think it was the dominant issue. Was a sense that we have to build a movement to stop this.
Yeah, for sure. Like, most of the signage that we saw was vaccine related, vaccine passport related, vaccine freedom, vaccine injury related. I also saw a bunch of American flags, some MAGA hats, but yeah, but by and large, at least from my perspective, I didn't meet you all until like I walked around, and I saw a lot of a diversity of people, in terms of racial, the racial part. I saw African American people, Latinx people. I seen, Asian people, Asian immigrants, people that, was speaking in also many languages. Yes, there was, and by and large, at least my feeling was that mostly it was like working class people. I didn't get a sense that it was like, your suits or the, the creme of the creme of people. You can tell that, it was like working people.
I noticed a lot of hippies, a lot of new agey people. I don't know if you saw them with some women and then they started walking around and at least in the second, I think it was when you had left, Andy. Do you remember some people were sitting behind us as well in the front?
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, okay, at least some people are showing up. They're part of this too.
Yeah, I think I would say politically it was more like libertarian, conservative, maybe more Republican. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't like as a person who identifies as being on the left, it wasn't like I felt like I didn't belong there. It was just a very new experience, because it was more the American flags and the chants of USA and things like that are like that's not something.
Well, that was very strong.
Yeah. And the religious aspects are not something you normally see on the left demonstrations. It's something where it's unusual for me in demonstrations, but I was talking to somebody who listens to us, but also who was there, and from Sacramento and helped us all come together. And she was expressing how it was a little odd for her to be in that kind of environment. And now, having done maybe 2 or 3 demonstrations now, I'm starting to get a little bit more used to it. I think the progressive side, the left side, will have to be stronger for us to really see if we're welcome into it. But I think I just think it's going to be a new world, you know, and a new kind of, at least for me, a new kind of place for where activism is going to take place and demonstrate how demonstrations are going to feel and what they're going to be like.
Yeah, I mean, just the character of the resistance, right? I guess because you know, one of the common themes here for me was freedom. You know, people want freedom. You know, I also noticed like anti-socialist, you know, propaganda, and you know, I'm like, I expected that. Even conversations, you know, because there's people that do associate, you know, these a big government, right, just with socialism, and so that was also part of it. And one more thing to, you know, note that I think is very important is just like I basically saw 1 or 2 people wearing a mask, you know, and by and large there were families, you know, very young, very, you know, older people. There was older people, you know, like in their 70s, probably, or maybe older, you know, also out there.
Mm-hmm. I had invited my brother to go, and I was surprised he was going to come with me. And he came, and he felt very in community. Seems like that was he said, because he had been feeling isolated. Like it's only he and I that we are discussing these things. And when we were walking over from the cafe over to the Capitol, there were police officers, and someone asked me what was I doing, or what was I, something along the lines of where was I heading, or what was going on, or what was happening. And I said, well, we're here to stand up. And I looked over at the officer, said, we're here to stand up for workers like them, for workers like you, for workers like us, for students. And that's why we're here for, to have the freedom to choose and to stand in solidarity as all of us. And I looked at the officer, said, and I'm sure that he may know as many people that are in right now in positions of feeling like people are going to probably have to do something they don't want to do. And the officer said it. I couldn't tell his expression. He had a mask on, very big dark sunglasses, but I mean, he didn't flinch. I think he just sort of and that was the message I was trying to make sure that in my head, that I was going in with that intention, no? And I was wanting to meet anybody that was going to be of difference of opinion with me, but that we were going to stand together. And I took a blank sign, and it was white, it was just blank. So I wanted to know what I had seen that I had not seen yet. And I just put left and right, time to unite. And that's all I had. It was very simple message. And some people came up to me and they said that they liked what I had put up a sign. And so, and like Kenya, I also saw a diversity of people. A lot of, yes, US American flags. It was somewhat jarring to see that many, and also see some of that more burly US American chants and all that around circle that they were doing. Did you all hear that when they were going in front of the Capitol? USA, USA, and and the very in the front. And I noticed there it was like their ritual or whatever they were doing, some thing that they were. It's a very it reminds me a little bit of the sort of the kind of colors that they put on, like a team sport sort of baseball game thing or whatever they do when they go to places. And I just was observant of it. But it was not, I didn't feel at any point as a person of color, or I didn't see any people feel like there was, I'm sure if it was inconvenience or felt uncomfortable, it was in their head, but I didn't see it physically manifested. I just saw families, I saw groups, people sat down, people talked, people took pictures, people liked each other's shirts. B for vaccine, people liked, and then people asked other people to take shirts of their things. I saw us, and I was very appreciative of us having come together. And that was a treat to see you both. And and to see Brandy there, and folks that we had only connected virtually.
Yeah, just one more thing I wanted to share is that I walk by myself. I'm obviously a brown man, and I consider a lot of the stereotypes that are thrown about right wingers and this and stuff. I never felt unsafe or threatened or antagonized. If anything, I don't know if you want to speak to that. When I arrived at the cafe, I think there was an engagement there with someone.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's relevant, but yeah, like just again, I felt safe, and it was kind of a day at the park almost.
Yeah, I mean, there's a guy who came up. So the people from Workers and Students for Choice, that's kind of how we organize a bit of a contingent, and then also some people from the California School Employees for Medical Freedom, that Facebook group, met at this cafe that two friends from our group from Sacramento. They had identified a place we could all meet. Well, a guy who had seen that we had signs and he could see that we were against mandates, he wanted to come over and engage us and say, he wanted to talk with us. He really wanted to argue with us. He really wanted to basically say, I think you are foolish. I mean, he didn't, and so that was just that is just like par for, I don't know. It was sort of, he seemed kind of like drunk almost. But that was just a way to get things started. And for me, it was good to see people in that group kind of take him on. And, I felt, pull. I mean, he wanted to make this whole thing about measles and stuff like that. And I think really people were able to give him facts about vaccines, not just the COVID vaccines. Actually, that never came up for discussion, but just vaccines in general. A lot of the folks who were doing this stuff have had a bad history with the vaccines that I had thought were more okay. And they have information about the fact that some of these things are not okay. And they don't want to take them. And they certainly don't want to mandate it. So while I got involved in this around big data analytics and distance learning, I have come to understand that there's a medical element to this about medical freedom that I didn't really know much about this world. I've learned about a particular set of vaccines, these mRNA and Johnson & Johnson special kind of vaccines, but there's people who also know about the measles ones and polio and DPT and things like that and have real concerns about them.
Let's remind people that you are someone that you're versed in the field of science, and so maybe you'd come at it from a different point of view. I think maybe
I would call that me just largely ignorant of that area. Like I knew about vaccines, but I didn't know anything about their potential safety and the potential hazards with them. And a year ago, I would have been a person who would have looked down on a person who was anti-vax and thought they were anti-science and blah blah blah. Closer to the, and I don't think that way anymore, and I think that way of thinking is wrong.
John Hopkins would be very proud of you.
they would come back and be critical of these people and remember that they're not science.
I mean, yeah, I think I've had a similar experience to you, and just in general in terms of science, not just vaccines, but even the people that raise the flag, right? Like 5G is like a concern, right? Like they might say it in a different way, but I'm like, let's look at what's people's. It might not be exactly playing out the way they see it, but to listen more to the people that might sound crazy. Yeah. And because I just like you, I was a liberal asshole, and for science, and all about facts, and like trying to like drown people in facts, and without realizing that I was regurgitating a lot of basically standardized produce or state produced information. And so yeah, this is urging me to take a pause too, and listen more to people, especially the people that have had experiences with this, because like you said, Libson, I've met people too that have had issues with vaccines, and yeah, you just gotta listen.
Yeah, and I wasn't a liberal asshole. I was a socialist asshole.
Yeah.
Is this where we should transition into what stood up for us? I think. What?
Yeah.
I mean, I think for me, there were two things that were maybe before would have been more of an inconvenience. I think it was one, I saw someone that carried the Star of David sign, and I'm still wrestling with that. It's just and then there was the religious aspect of the last speakers, and I liked the other speakers I had heard. Even when we were sitting in a circle, I had sort of was hearing some of the speakers, but the speakers, the religious those, I'm curious to get your take on those. Those were, I didn't expect Doctora Cristina, the one that was when you had heard, Handy, before you left, and she had said, and I'm going to tell you something. It's time to go to church. She said something like that. Do you remember, Kenny? I was like, oh, geez, here it comes. She's like, let's all get, I'm just like, I don't know about this. So what was her name, Kenny? Her full name?
Christina Parks, I think. And she's a doctor. She's a medical doctor. She gave a lot of information about vaccines and about the COVID vaccines, that and the spike protein, and
and then she testified in I think the Senate in Michigan.
Yeah.
And so Dr. Christina Parks. I think I'm gonna look into more of her work, and
she was a brilliant speaker.
Yeah.
Yeah. For me, I mean, I don't know if you want to speak to this, Kenny, but I liked her David and Goliath thing. There was a lot of analogies that I thought were appropriate. I don't claim Christianity, but I found it arousing. It was a pretty inspirational part of her talk. She gave information, and then she gave motivation about people who are embattled and who are facing gigantic odds. And the analogy that really stuck out the most was when David goes to his brothers and says, and the brothers say, wait, you left your sheep, but he's like, yeah, I left my sheep because there's something I got to do. I can't be with the sheep. I got to be among the lions, if you will, to fight this Goliath, and that had a lot of meaning. She tried to say, look, that's what we are all here to do. We have left sheep behind to do something that's important. And I was like, I felt that.
I actually noticed that there were people wearing that shirt that said lions, not sheep, something along those lines. That kind of was a theme, but I agree with you. Like, I don't know if she actually believes that, or that was just considerate for the type of audience. Because I think that either ways, it's I think previously I would have rejected that completely, but it's a way of understanding for people, and and if we want to live in an open society, you have to accept that people use different analogies, different perspectives of seeing the world, but that they're not mutually exclusive necessarily, because this is a fight, right, against the Goliath, and I think at least us here, we feel that we're the small, we're David, and and our people are siding with the big bully here. A lot of people we know, and so I love that too. It was very powerful, and I just try to listen and not judge. And I'm not a religious person. I would describe myself as spiritual, or like, but not institutionally practice anything.
It was reinvigorating. I remember when I organized against Syngenta, and I went to Gilroy, and this was Occupy Monsanto, Occupy Syngenta, Occupy GMOs. I went over and I organized a small group, and not everyone went. It was Gilroy, Syngenta's this company, and there's an article I can share of a reporter that contacted me, and also reported on my event. And I remember the workers of Syngenta coming out during lunch. looking at me as if I'm a crazy person with my bullhorn. And there were 15 of us. There's this big company, and we're like outside the company. And crazy me at 24, I yell out and I say, I see you looking at me, Goliath. So you come at me, because I'm also I was raised a Jehovah's Witness.
Yeah.
So like when she said this, I thought, oh, that reminds me when, so I thought it's a very good analogy, because you're facing the bureaucracy, you're facing and everyone is, and she said, I don't think she meant it to say like offensively, but she said people are cowarding. I don't know how, like the way she presented it, it's not like workers who are taking the vaccine are, she didn't just say they were cowards. No, she said lots of people are cowarding. And you know what we need right now? She said, we need you to stand up and hold the line. Hold the line. And you are being here and you're standing up for who? You're standing up. Let me tell you for who. You're standing up for our children. I was like, oh, jeez, touch me right there. Don't go to COVID journey episode.
Yeah.
So.
No, and I presume she seemed like somebody who, is probably Christian and goes to church. And this is the kind of thing that would either be used to hearing and used to saying. So it seemed pretty legit to me. And it was not something I would normally hear in a speech at a left rally, but she meant it, and that's what's important.
Yeah, it was very invigorating, and I looked over. I remember looking over at you, Andy, and I looked over at Kenny, and I looked over at Brandon. I thought, oh, geez, we're in church. Suddenly we're in church. Because didn't we pray? Were you there when they had us pray? We had to. I didn't. I mean, I just looked.
I wasn't there at that time. I mean, maybe was that Kevin Jenkins at the end after that.
Kenny, I forget which one. Who was the one? Was she the?
It was Christina. Yeah, Padre Nuestro. I don't know how you say that.
Thy father.
Thy father. Yeah, I don't know.
Oh yeah. She did. She the holy bread and yeah. I mean, but I clapped at the end of that. Lord. I didn't pray or anything like that, but I clapped for it.
Yeah, it was moving. I have to say, it was moving to see that many people really there. I think it was for me respecting other people's way of dealing with the assault on people's bodies, people being under duress, workers feeling no hope. I think whatever people's religious belief was, I think for me, what I took from it was this was a moment for people to come together, from people who came 2 hours away, like Amanda. Some people came 3 hours away, and we came together, and it was, and for Jonathan, my brother, and I wish he would be here to speak to it, feeling a bit isolated, like no one else is talking about this. This is where I'm finding people I'm not alone, and this gives me strength to keep going. No, it's difficult, and we've discussed that on these episodes.
Mm-hmm. And there was a woman who came from San Diego, who was part of our workers and students for Choice Group. So there are some people who came from pretty far.
It was nice to see you all in person. I think that was something we were talking about before recording this. That at least for me, now what we're doing here, we've been doing this for 18 months from, virtually. Like, this feels weird. Having been in person earlier today to doing this here, through our little squares, rectangles, whatever. And it is very invigorating to see that there is other people, there is resistance, even if it's, it is a minority, there is resistance, and, so that's why I do find some a lot of value in, that whole framing of, lions, because you need to be fierce. This fight is, when you're against the wall, it's going to take a lot, and it's going to take roaring and being loud, and so other people who might be hesitant to speak up, because there are people, I know some people that, know things are wrong, in their own industry, or, but they are hesitant to speak up or take a stand, because, at least in my book, this is a political stand. and this is what adds up to being essentially political persecution in my book. Of a sector of people, coercion, manipulation, force, all those words were seen there, and I think it's right on, so I'm glad to see that. And also I'm glad to see the variety of reasons, in the cards. The people were there, I love to see people, bringing up BlackRock, the biggest manager of assets in the world. They control a big portion of the stock market, and they're part of the World Economic Forum, and previously I also attended a march here in San Francisco. And I was also pleasantly surprised. It had a similar character. It's mostly libertarian to and conservative. A lot of American flags. A lot of people that work for the city, actually. Public servants. But again, just this notion that this is not just about that vaccine. That idea is there. It's not absent, is that this is about vaccine passports. This is about control. This is sets a dangerous precedent, and so it gives me energy to see that there is people getting to the same conclusions that we've reached, I think, here.
Mm-hmm.
We had an interesting conversation, Kenny and I, and in the by the way, thank you, Kenny, for dropping me off. I forget to tell you left, and I forgot you left. I didn't tell you gracias. And we've discussed there are stakes here. We're not just doing this politically, like, oh, it's just some ideology here. This is like real life stakes at stake here. Like, this is your livelihoods that were also on the line. And I wanted to know just quickly, or I don't know however much we want to share, but you have a certain deadline, Kenny.
Yeah, no, I do. In San Francisco, I have to show proof of full vaccination by October 13th, or go a different route. But basically, they're pressuring me to do it or not be able to work indoors. And so it's real. It's caused a lot of anxiety, a lot of thinking, and it's also surreal that there are people who don't understand how real this is for me, and people that I would have thought that would understand because they empathize, at least in rhetoric, or maybe in other issues that are also about social control, compliance, force. Does not go far. Immigration system, people being subjected to medical procedures at the concentration camps that we call detention centers, but they don't see this logic. There's cognitive dissonance in that sense, but yeah, it's real. October 13th is coming, and I know that there's also state workers facing that harsh reality. I know people in the medical field too facing that reality, and by and large, people are just shrugging and be like, you're shit out of luck, I guess.
You're talking about your livelihood, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
And that's what I heard. I mean, that is my situation. This is my presence here is from a sense that I am not sure I'm going to be able to keep a job that I love to do. At least I love teaching students in person. And I've really enjoyed this year doing that at Mission. I do think that's at stake if these mandates, which are like, oh, you can take the vaccine or you can get PCR. If they remove that PCR, then I'm not going to be able to continue in my job. And those are the stakes that I heard when we met at Workers for Students for Choice at that cafe. Each person was talking about that's the stakes for them, whether or not they can carry on with their job or not. And so those are pretty big because the job is life under capitalism for a worker. It's like that is the difference between you being just shoved to the bottom or you having a little bit of agency to kind of scramble your way through a very dictatorial system, capitalism. So it is a question of survival, and it can feel like life and death. So that definitely felt like it animated people. there, and it made that's why I was so glad to meet. I mean, some highlight for me to meet with people from the either workers and students for choice, or people who had listened to What's Left and I had talked with on the phone but never met them in person, is to feel that personal sense of stakes together. Like that's what solidarity feels like. I know that like some of the people had already lost work and had to leave their job. But some people were facing that situation. Some people were facing the prospect of maybe not being able to lose their job. So they were going to take the jab, even though they're 100% against it, just like I am. So that I felt very much solidarity there. And it was, that was really, I really was glad to be able to be there and meet those people in person. It was a big deal for me to see both of you there. Like, it's been a long time since the three of us have been able to be physically together. And it was really great to hug Kenny and hug, you, Eduardo. And I also really enjoyed, like, there was a time when I was talking to somebody else on the side. I really enjoyed watching you and Brandy and Eduardo, Kenny, Eduardo, and Brandy, talking with the other people from the group and other people like that are around that. I don't know, to watch that, even though I was talking with somebody, it gave me a really good feeling inside of just like, of a community being built, and that meant a lot to me. And really to go down there with Brandy, like, and to see her just kind of like go right into it. I think, so I know, Eduardo, you have seen the pictures of Brandy with those posters where she's peeking. I don't know if you saw those, Kenny. Can you see this? That's her, right? And there's another one. I love that.
Can you read them just so people that are
listening? Oh, yeah.
Oh, right.
Stop. One says, stop vax mandates, digital IDs, censorship and surveillance. And Brandy's peeking above on the top. And the other one says, protect medical freedom. That's the other side, because it's green and yellow on one side, and she's peeking from the side. I just love those two photos. I just get a kick out of just being like, I never thought a month before my wedding, this would be something me and Brandy would be doing. And I certainly never thought that a month before our wedding, like that last night when we were, when she was making those signs, she's sitting there making those two signs. And I'm stuffing bags full of wedding favors for the people who are going to come to the wedding. So like I was doing wedding work and she was making the sign. And in a million years, if you'd have said that was going to be what's happening 1 month up into our wedding, I would have said no way, but it really is for me, it's a confirmation that I'm marrying the right woman. But also I feel very much like I belong there and she belongs there. Like we belong there together in that space. I think we bring a little bit of a different energy, and I really like what she brings. So it was really great to have that. So those are some of the most special things, is to see you both there, to see people I love, you two and Brandy, with people who I'm learning to build a community with and feel politically aligned with. And then just to be in a large group of people who are trying to fight for this. We have a long way to go. France and Italy and Britain, which have had much bigger demonstrations, show we have a long way to go. But it was nice to see some of the fruit of our work too, of like trying to build something together, actually be able to bring some people together to contribute to this demonstration.
I love the conversations that we had there with the people that are part of the group, workers, teachers and students for choice, right?
Yeah, workers and students for choice.
Workers and students for choice. And just being able to talk open and freely, because I feel that that's lacking in my context. I've again, isolation is a common theme among us as individuals, but obviously collectively, we can share and learn, because there are different angles, there are different reasons people have gotten to these conclusions. We don't all listen to one person, and we all have experiences, that give us reasons to, not only question but resist this, what's happening. So I appreciate, you know, the different people sharing, you know, their experiences, and you know, in having the space to talk freely, openly, in communion, you know, without fear or anxiety. You know, it was very genuine, and you know, I missed that. You know, I missed that from a lot of people that I went to the trenches with during the pandemic, and but they've been overcome by you know, a lot of the anxiety and constant propaganda. That's how I see it, and so yeah, so it means it feels good to connect with people, you know, new people who again understand, you know, a decent amount of what's happening, and you know why it may be happening, in people who are fierce, you know, because that's what I notice, at least fears in their own way, fears in taking a stand, you know, in understanding that there is a cost to this, and you know, because I know people who have taken the other route, and you know, I don't necessarily judge them, you know. I hope that but you know, this is bigger than, you know, a pandemic, and you know, with real consequences. And I know, you know, you can put me on the other side and they would argue similarly, but you know, this feels very organic. It doesn't, you know, it's not like a regurgitation of like this fact and this fact. You know, we were sharing experiences, and you know, I think that's what humanity is about, you know, and that's literally what we're fighting for. What's at stake here, you know, our ability to be human. And that's why I love Kevin Jenkins. Is that the name of the last speaker?
Yes.
Okay. And so, you know, he brought up the fact that he asked us all to hug before, after you left. He asked us all to hug, you know, and you know, and then he brought up, you know, this is what they want to take away from us. And you know, I believe that. You know, that's you know, if there's any new listeners, or you know, people, you know, just the fact that we have to do this through these rectangles, you know, and you know, this is just the beginning of, you know, and a very fast, a process is accelerating, you know, and it's gonna continue to push. And so, like they said there, you know, we need people to hold the line, people that are willing to stand. And like I've said in other shows, you know, I am looking for people that are willing to get punched in the face and continue fighting, you know, and you know, and you know, I don't necessarily judge everyone else, you know, on a like a moralistic, you know, I kind of understand, you know, but like they said too, this is time to meet other lions that are willing to roar, you know, and fight back.
Yeah, I think I'll say two things, and I think so the 31st of August was International Overdose Awareness Day, and I was discussing this at the rally and with some people, and I said that I feel as if one thing that people in my circle of friends, my liberal friends, that constantly talk to me about how COVID kills, or there is COVID, the cause of COVID, you know, that it's so important, but our relationships are not something, they just don't matter. Or even in the feeds that I was looking at from last you know, from last week, there wasn't any mention of how many people died in San Francisco last year from overdose, right? And I'm comfortable saying it now, but my father is an addict, and he, last year was the most time I tried to spend a lot of time with him to not allow for that isolation to happen, which I was told to do the opposite of. And people, it's a real thing, like isolation, depression, suicide. These things happen, but they're not as important suddenly. Mental health, we praise, we clap, and we say, great that artists come forward, right? Like I think it was who's the artist? Can you call Day and Night? Day and Night, the song. Well,
I know the song. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, he came forward, and many artists have come forward about mental health, their mental health, and it was very much something that people would talk about, but it's not. It's somehow there's not enough. It's not as important as COVID, and it's Kid Cudi. So that was something I appreciated having discussed with one of the members there. And secondly, the second thing I want to say is I saw two women, and Kenny was there, that had approached me, and one was an RN, and I think she had been dismissed from her job, Kenny, and another was an educator. And they had seen my sign where I had said left and right, time to unite. And she had said that she thought she's a progressive, and she said that she did believe she's a leftist. And she said, I do believe it's time. And I said, yeah, it's where the rubber has hit the road. We need to start thinking about how we can create alliances. And then we discussed some bit. Kenny shared some. You might want to say something about that, Kenny. And she asked us about, I said, this is my friend and co-host from What's Left of our podcast. And she asked for our podcast name, and she said, where, and they might be listening to this today or when this is posted. And she said, where are you? And I said, well, it's What's Left. And I had to tear a bit of my post. What did you talk about that part?
I just shared, that I'm facing that October 13th deadline. And, they were just voicing, just again, concern and just disagreement with what's happening. And, it's just, again, it's just good to talk to people. And, that's the scary part about this, that, it's something that a reason that I've been pushed away from liberal politics has been that binary, and how, it's not just conservatives, actually, by and large, and, at least on TV, liberal media is portrayed as conservatives antagonizing, but I'm actually pretty sure there's a lot of antagonizing on the left, and actually condescending talking. I've expressed extensively how I hate that, the condescension, and, like dehumanizing, really, aspects of seeing right-wingers as just ignorant brutes, people without independent thought. And then here we are, and so, it's just nice to talk to people from, different walks of life. I don't know what their political inclination was. I think you think
leftists.
But, by and large, it's like, we're not supposed to talk to these people. We're not supposed to be there. It's supposed to feel weird. You know what?
Our enemies.
They're the enemies. They're the fascists. They're the ones who want to control women's bodies. And guess what? There's a lot of people supporting the control of women's bodies right now with this vaccine.
So when I got together with my students when I did that circuits in the park thing, I talked about surprises, like being surprised by things instead of just the humdrum of everyday remote. And I think that's what this demonstration is for me in terms of talking to people. Like, I've been to a lot of leftists, anti-war, immigrant rights, anti-death penalty, anti-criminal justice. Honestly, there were very few surprises in the conversations I would have with people. Like, everyone kind of assumed we're all on the same page. There was no real reason to talk to everyone because people basically thought we were all just thinking the same thing. And that's different in this place. It's like, I don't know where people are coming from. And so one of the things I felt was the need to kind of take time and just talk with people and find out where they're coming from. And I do think that's going to be part of what is the work to be done when we do this, is just to get to know people, see where they are coming from, try to hear out where we're coming from. And for people to like learn how to do that. Because I had some conversations where some people said some things that I was like, I'm not sure I agree with that. I had to pick where I was going to challenge some things or where I was going to put forward another idea. But the idea was to stay engaged in conversation with the people I was talking with. And so that was what was nice about this, is like I did not know where people were coming from when I spoke with them. And you find out by talking to them. And that's different than a place where it's just, we're all the left, we all understand it, we all know why we're here, we don't have anything to say to each other. Leftists and socialists will say that because there are people chanting USA, USA, because there are people who hail conservative or are libertarian or right wing there, that should show me that I don't belong there, that I shouldn't be there. That should show me that my cause is wrong. And I don't know what to tell you. That kind of thinking is, in my mind, it's just doesn't, it has no life to it. Because what tells me my cause is right is that the state is trying to tell me what to do with my body, and it's going to use my job as a way of leveraging their right to tell me what to do with it. And if you're a socialist and you don't see something wrong with a worker being told by the state, here's what you have to do with your body if you want to keep your job, then I don't know what to tell you. And if it turns out a conservative understands that, if it turns out a libertarian understands that, but a socialist doesn't, then I'm not going to be talking with those socialists about fighting that cause, because those people have got their heads up their asses. And so I have to go work with people who are somewhere else, who have a different set of ideas about how the world is constructed, but for whatever reason have come to enough sense to realize that when the state tells you what to do, you don't trust the state, you oppose it. Because and they're not even Marxists. They don't look at the capitalist state from the framework of profit and of a capitalist class as an end, the bourgeois state. They don't even have that framework, and they get it. So I would just say that, like, I guess for me, the only way I believe we're going to have to build a movement of workers that cross all these lines. I do believe that workers will ultimately have to come to in my opinion, will have to come to an understanding about capitalism, about the working class, about the capitalist class. That is my belief if we're going to get through this. But that's not where things are at right now. And I'm going to start working with workers who at least understand that the state is coming after us, and we want to fight that. And some of those people think that they want to fight the vaccine passports, but they want to keep passports at the border. And I'm going to be arguing with them. Be like, if you're against these vaccine passports, you should be against those vaccine passports at the border. They're not necessarily going to agree with me, but that's the discussion to begin to be engaged in as we do this work together. So that's just something that comes to mind for me.
I think there's one more, thing that also has to be brought to the table, right? But you have to be willing to work with people, and again, there's inconsistencies on both sides. It's just that I'm not here to pick sides in the sense of, I'm going to stick with my gang. If I'm like I think you said this before, Lipson. And I reached that point. I'm not here to say what people are ready to hear. I have to say what I believe, what I think, what I rationalize, and put that to the test too, and so I'm, by and large, I think, a lot of socialists have sided with the state, in this, and so they have fed those anxieties that the conservatives have about socialism, right? That the state. So how can how can you then proclaim some consistency? Because I'm a socialist, right? I'm a socialist because I want to live in a free society where individuals have the liberty to be who they want to be, where they are not coerced through, rents, right? Like, a worker, you're dispossessed from birth. They're not coerced to wage slavery. You have to keep your shitty job because you have shitty bosses and you have to, tolerate them. They're not coerced by abusive partners because you have a place to live. You have food, you have security, and, that's the society I want to live in. Not in a society of independent thinkers that will question and go to war with whichever state is in place, even a socialist state. Even a self-proclaimed socialist, we go to war with them because that's the state I want to live in. Be ready to fight for freedom, justice. And apparently, that's the funny thing, that it's scary, like how a lot of people, on the left, socialists and liberals, are just like, sure, liberty. What's liberty for, or what's a casualty of the vaccine? right? Like, I think John Kleisig was the one who said, like, like it sounds like they just want to choose who lives and who dies, with the vaccines, because you're sentencing people, by, coercing them. That is what capitalism is in my mind. It coerces us to do shitty shit, in so many ways. And so here we are, the left is supporting coercion. Hell no. That's not why I'm a socialist. I'm not a socialist to regurgitate bullshit just like liberals are doing it. I'm a socialist to be an independent thinker and an individual. But I understand that in order to fight back against these big forces, it has to be collective. That is where our safety is. And so yes, it's scary that the left, by and large, has just committed to working harder at explaining the official storyline than deconstructing the bullshit and the lies behind the official storyline. It's scary to see the left just shrug. Oh, DARPA is behind this, the military, Google, Apple, the investment bankers. Go to the World Economic Forum if you've never looked at it. Just look at the partnerships, of the people behind it. And so it's just hard and disheartening to see people that fight for immigrant rights. People fight for the autonomy of women and their right to decide on their bodies. People who claim equality. People who fight racism. People who cite the white colonial settler, whatever, like a gospel. It's madness. How they don't see that. And Kevin Jenkins, the last speaker today, brought that up. That if you are supporting vaccine mandates, he compared that to being a slave catcher. He's a black man, talking about liberty, and so, if we don't understand, and that again, it shows that we don't understand history. Mm-hmm. We don't understand Nuremberg, the Nuremberg trials, right? Like, we don't understand, forced coercion, or at least we only want to pick and choose when that is viable. And I'm not for that. We got to be consistent.
Mm-hmm. It's said that I think it was in 2008, or I forget, but Glenn Greenwald, who has been speaking out more against vaccine mandates and against, just talking about COVID stuff recently, which I feel like he's a little late in the game. He's very smart. He should have been speaking about this. He's still my idol, my crush. But so, like Alexander Ocasio-Cortez was before, but
I think you left her now. I'm glad you've moved on. It's a better crush to have, I think.
What I wanted to say was that he had pointed out that the ACLU had in the past come out against anything mandates in under the guise of safety, and this is the ACLU, and warning that if there is a pandemic, if there is some sort of epidemic or something, that you should be wary of a government trying to institutionalize some form of mandate, and you should stand against it, and it would be an assault on the civil liberties. Well, there was an op-ed in the New York Times recently, and there were lawyers from the ACLU saying that the mandates actually will give you freedom or something to that effect. And Glenn Greenwald's like, what are they talking about? This is so against what they stood for years before. And I'll link it to the description, to the notes of this episode, where we find this episode. And we're just, the left, sorry, we're like sounding like a broken record, but again, turned on it's somehow everything has changed. And that's what I want to say, that that's all. It's unfortunate that even Civil Liberties Union, like the ACLU, has now turned back on its own word.
So I think, like, I did hear some of the speakers, and in the case of the woman who was the doctor, I can't remember, I said her name earlier, Christina
Banks.
Banks?
Parks.
You know, okay, Christina Parks. She kind of got at an idea of what is next.
Go to church.
Yeah, but I want to ask you all, in light of this demonstration, what's next for? And I'm going to say us. That could mean us, the three of us. It could mean what workers for students, or what would be your, if you were trying to give guidance for people trying to fight this, what would you say to them? Like, what's next?
I mean, I think Eduardo, if you, we had a conversation, you know, and so basically, it's like, for me, it's this has to be fought in daylight. This cannot be fought in back alleys. This cannot be fought running away. You know, again, I was inspired by Kevin Jenkins, who said, you know, like he quoted both Frederick Douglass and Harriet Tubman. You know, and he, more particularly, I remember hearing how he described Harriet Tubman's escape, right? And how she was talking about dogs. When you hear the dogs, you keep moving, you know, and then how she got to safety, but she came back for, you know, for everyone else. And so for me is, you know, I don't blame people, you know, what they have to do as individuals, but that's not going to stop there. That's a temporary fix. You know, this is bigger than just a vaccine in our bodies, you know, because the forces behind this are, you know, in my frame of analysis, the global, you know, capitalist forces, you know, pushing this through. They won't rest until they get what they want, because they have already started something massive. And so these won't stop here. This fight begins, you know, right now. And, you know, I hope that if people choose to run for now, is so that they can revitalize themselves to keep fighting, because this is a fight, you know, to defend literally our humanity, our freedom to choose, you know. And it's not just an American thing, you know. This is not just you know, San Francisco thing, you know. This is the tentacles of this thing have a global reach, you know. And life as we know it is done, is whether we will have a say, or what degree of say we'll have to determine what's next. So we can run for now, you know, and sometimes you do. You know, I heard a Marine, actually, out of all people, that your first, you know, the first advice he has, you know, if you're facing someone bigger and stronger, the first advice he has is that your biggest tool is your feet. Now, if they grab you, that's a different fucking question. And so right now they're trying to grab us. And so my point is that I think we need to fight in daylight. We need to let it know. We need to be loud. You know, we need to hopefully encourage other people to join the fight, because it's just starting. Yeah, so get ready, and you know, hopefully we can find more people, you know, to sustain the fight, to hold the line.
Yeah.
And you know, because you know, I again, in my mind, I don't think that if you're not fighting for yourself, and I see this a lot in liberal you know, organizing circles that I'm part of. If you're not fighting for yourself, all you can offer is some sentiment to other people. Mm-hmm. You know, real solidarity is what you mentioned earlier, Lipson, is putting your neck on the line there when you have something at stake. You know, and you see that, you know, so this can be bad, but this can also be an opportunity to reach across people we're not supposed to talk to. You know, to reach people we wouldn't usually just even see in our daily lives, you know, in our segregated lives, you know, ideologically segregated lives. Mm-hmm. So, and I believe, you know, that only revolution can change the world. This is only another step in capitalism, in my book. Mm-hmm. You know, capitalism is fundamentally racist, exploitative, you know, coercive. And so this is another chapter in that book. It's just that we are in the midst of it, you know, and we're not that unique, because there's been other people who have had their neck on the line, you know, and you know, I think I have a picture that I went to a Black Panther exhibit, you know, some years ago, and I took a picture of the silhouette of a Vietnamese soldier, you know, holding his rifle up, you know, saying Vietnam will win. And I find, you know, motivation in that, because some people that recount the fight of the Vietnamese against the imperial forces of the U.S. They recount that they were basically winning. They won the war on one bowl of rice a day. They were fighting a mighty army, technologically advanced, and we've talked about, in previous episodes, how the Taliban too fought off, this ragtag group of people fought off what might as well be an alien species with alien technology, the U.S. military. And the U.S. military could not repress and, could not repress the fire that people had for survival, because this is what we're fighting for here too, literal survival. And so I would not discount that, because the purpose of life is to live, for me. And life will find a way, and I'm ready to fight.
I think for me, I think it can be overwhelming for a lot of people who are workers and students, to think that they are going to be the creator or try to ignite a revolution or something. But I'm drawing inspiration from the last meeting that we had, and I invite folks on this episode, whoever's listening, they can go on and meet us there for next Tuesday, or in 2 weeks on Tuesday, where we're all going to be meeting. But it's a standby next Tuesday. And there was a student there that I think she was the only student there, and there was another educator from a university. And one thing that stood out for me was how much they're just themselves, they are stand in wherever they were at in their university, going to classes even if they were going to be denied, going back to class even if they were going to be denied, keep going back even if they were going to be asked, and then just allowing herself to be that stand in that school. And then the other educator shared how it's also about seeing and looking for cues in your environment. If you see someone who is obviously behind a plexiglass, double masked, and using hand sanitizer all over the place, you might not find your ally there. Who knows, maybe you might. But you'll probably find your ally with the person who you see is wearing the mask up to here, or sort of, just sort of not very laxed with the protocols. And not because they're being unsafe, it's just because they probably also are realizing that, look, I wouldn't even be here if I was sick. I'm just having to follow these rules because that's what to be indoors looks like. And talking to these people and seeing where they are at. And these two individuals that shared with us show that any regular nobodies or any person, wherever you're at, this is, and I do believe what Henny and I had been discussing in the vehicle together today, which was an hour and a half drive as I was knitting. And we were discussing how this fight has to be in daylight. I can imagine that for many, that would be very challenging, especially like we were saying in today's rally. Some people, I mean, the three of us want to do this podcast, right? We're public people now, some modicum of, public personas, but some people are not asking to be public. They're not wanting, they just want, like, I know someone who works in a university who is not asking to be an activist, who is not asking to be, but they are being pushed by this to be in the public eye. And as Kenny and I were discussing, this fight has to be in the daylight because there's a lot at stake for a lot of people and for themselves. And so I think that for it not to be so overwhelming, there has to be this idea that every nobody is making a difference. And it means going up to your classroom and being that student who was being denied in the face of it all, And it reminds me sort of how that student from, the students that were Black to go to class, that were being attacked and, being the only ones. and looking for those allies in the way that you can, like the other educator that shared with us on Tuesday. And that's, I think, at least feasible for the concept of how you can go about this. And sure, we can do more than that. I'm just trying to bring it down to a level of where can I start? Where do I go from here?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with both what Kenny, you said, and Eduardo, what you said. I've been thinking about what are we trying to build? And I think, like, I do believe that the next step for, like, well, at least in the Bay Area, the next step for the people who are organized in the Bay Area is to meet in person. Like, I think that's important. So, and I think to meet in person, and I don't know what we're going to do when we meet in person. There's not going to be some sort of magical thing that's going to happen other than we're going to actually overcome the barriers, like Kenny was talking about in the beginning, of like the Zoom stuff and the electronic stuff. And that's an important thing to overcome. And I think what I'm going to say is I believe that the movement we're building is founded on trust. And like will have to be built by a network of trust that spans neighborhoods, that spans cities, that then spans states, and that will have to span the globe in a sort. But networks of trust are going to need to be tied together and all believe they're part of a common cause of fighting a force that we cannot trust. And I believe those are the capitalists. But I do think that it is about finding who that, if you're alone, I do think your next step is finding another person and finding a person you can talk with about this. And then begin to build from there. And maybe sometimes it is online, but ultimately you are going to have to find somebody who you can actually physically be in the same space with, and who you can actually do something to the world, because we can't do it. This world is controlled by them. But a world that we can put our hands on is one that has the potential to be controlled by us. And so that for me is like Kenny, Eduardo, and Brandy, and AJ, and Brian, and whoever starts to, I build from there, because that's what I think. And I think the network we're building, as much as I believe it's about Marxism or socialism or revolution, I do believe that the network that workers are having to build is going to be founded on building trust between each other. That's why honesty is going to be important. That's why we can't lie to each other when we're in the struggle. And we're going to have to be able to believe each other when we say, I'm afraid I don't want to do that fight, and you won't, or that you say, no, I'm ready to do this. Let's do this, So that's the thing that comes to mind is the notion that I would urge people to begin to start where they're at in finding who they can around them, to go from 1 to 2 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 7, and that's what I think we're going to have to knit together across the country and across the state and across the country to have a chance of defeating this giant opponent we're against.
Yeah, I have a quote, and then I think I'm done.
Yeah.
So this is from Pierre-Joseph Proudhon, who was considered the father of anarchism, and who also had Karl Marx had a correspondence with him because of some of his works, and they actually met in Paris. And so I thought it was because you two are socialists and you're always talking about Marx and Karl this and Karl that. I thought, okay, well, I hardly talk about my own inspirations, and it's funny because eventually they influenced each other when they were in Paris, when Karl Marx was exiled in Paris, and they were very the father of anarchism and the father of socialism here in one city, in France, and then Proudhon wrote another book, another of his works, and that caused dispute and conflict between them, but eventually had to split. And I remember Kenny had shared a meme with us once on our group message where it was, I think, one was an anarchist and one was a socialist, and maybe we could share it here. And he said, okay, we're good until the revolution starts, because then we'll have to figure it out. So I feel like that's what today's was. It's like, right now we're together. We'll figure it out later. Who knows?
Yeah.
So as I wear all of black today, and it was not planned. All right, so here's this quote that I think this is the last for me. So this is from Demanding the Impossible: A History of Anarchism by Peter Marshall, and this book has been my sort of Bible to anarchism. And here is this is a good quote. So he says, "To be governed is to be watched over, inspected, spied on, directed, legislated, regimented, closed in, indoctrinated, preached at, controlled, assessed, evaluated, censored, commanded, all by creatures that have neither the right, nor wisdom, nor virtue. To be governed means that at every move, operation, or transaction, one is noted, registered, entered in a census, taxed, stamped, priced, assessed, patented, licensed, authorized, recommended, admonished, prevented, reformed, set right, corrected. Government means to be subjected to tribute, trained, ransomed, exploited, monopolized, extorted, pressured, mystified, robbed, all in the name of public utility and the general good. Then, at the first sign of resistance or word of complaint, one is repressed, fined, despised, vexed, pursued, hustled, beaten up, garroted, imprisoned, shot, machine-gunned, judged, sentenced, deported, sacrificed, sold, betrayed, and to capital, ridiculed, mocked, outraged, and dishonored. That is government. That is its justice and its morality." So those were the words of...
That's some good stuff there, Eduardo.
Yeah. Pierre-Joseph Proudhon. All right. I'll post it up and I'll link something so that people can find the quote themselves if they want.
I completely agree.
So if no one has anything else to add.
Just thanks everyone from the Workers and Students for Choice, people who listen to What's Left, whoever showed up there with us. Thank you very much. Made it a great event for me.
And if we couldn't show up this time, we'll have other opportunities. Our fight is going to continue. Hopefully, we can have more people join and stand in solidarity with each other to fight back.
Mm-hmm.
So if you've made it this far, thank you. That does it for this week's episode. What's Left is a weekly political podcast as channel challenging the mainstream left. We post information about our topics and our guests on the episode notes wherever you found this episode or on our blog at what-s-left.webnode.com. You can find past episodes to this podcast last channel there and connect with us. I remind folks, if you like anything you have heard here, please share your favorite episode, rate, review. Thank you for some people that have done that on iTunes podcast. I noticed some people wrote some reviews. Thank you very much. And subscribe to any of our platforms that you would find convenient for you, such as Spotify, iTunes podcast, Stitcher, Google Play, BitChute, Odyssey, ODYSEE, YouTube. We're also on Telegram, and you can find those links on the episode notes. If you would like to give us feedback about something you've heard or suggest something for us to cover, contact us through our blog, and Andy will most likely respond to you. Thank you very much. I'm Eduardo Abarca with co-hosts Kenny Cepeda and Andy Lipson. See you all next time. Ciao.